Welcome to Your Future in Sales and Marketing, a podcast that helps you make great career decisions to get the most out of your career journey. We'll introduce you to the AXR network of established senior leaders and a hand-picked group of future aspiring leaders who have it all in front of them. You'll learn what it's like in the top job and how to get there. Your hosts from AXR's specialist sales and marketing recruitment team will also land bonus episodes for you on how to work with recruiters, write a resume, and smash an interview, as well as our very popular market updates. It's the podcast that has it all. You can't get this career advice anywhere else.
Welcome everyone to Your Future in Sales and Marketing. My name is Mike Dixon from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're joined in the studio today by Tanya Pitchforth, Chief Commercial Officer of McPherson's Consumer Products. Welcome to the pod, Tanya. How are you?
Good, thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. You're most welcome. I've just come rushing here from a conference on AI, and it's so funny that ChatGPT, Claude and Gemini are all trying to hijack the pods this morning.
It's the way of the modern world.
I know. Go away. I don't need you AI today. This is a human conversation we're going to have. So all is good. So as always, Tanya, we're going to get into a couple of our favorite icebreaker questions. First of all, you have to tell me what your favorite brand is, and it can't be one you've worked on.
I love this question, Mike. And I think, honestly, my answer hasn't changed from that moment that you first asked me this. My favorite brand is Too Good To Go. Are you familiar with Too Good To Go?
I am.
Yeah. So I think it's an elegant solution to food waste. The founders from the Nordics sort of started the brand, and we're really trying to tackle a problem with purpose. And what I love about the brand is that they've created something that is sharp, it's commercial, it's consumer-centric, and it's not condescending or patronizing, but legitimately can have an impact on the food waste solution. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it's an app. It is now available in Australia and New Zealand. They've come over here quite recently, and it connects companies with oversupply of food or food waste to consumers who can opt for it in a really playful kind of a way, and gives agency to the people. So for me, it represents what the future of brands really should be. You know, sharp, commercial focused, not patronizing, authentic, and something that is consumer and customer centric. Very easy to use.
What a brilliant business idea. I love it. Fantastic. Too Good To Go.
Too Good To Go. That's right.
Okay. On all the app stores.
I presume so, yes. We're giving them a nice pitch now.
We are. And a bit about you. You know, we'll jump into your career in a second, but where did you grow up? Tell us about life before the career started.
Yeah, so I'm actually a Kiwi. I was born in Eastbourne in New Zealand, which is on the very tip of the North Island, near the beach. I have a couple of brothers, and I think a couple of things that marked that time. I mean, it was fairly idyllic. We did move around a little bit as well for my parents' work and so on, moved to Auckland, and then I eventually moved to Dunedin for university. But I think a couple of key things were we're always quite entrepreneurial. Family were always entrepreneurial. I think we started our first business when I was about 8-9 years old. My brother and I started a neighbourhood newspaper business and selling newspapers, but we kind of exhausted our supply of cousins to write recipes and to contribute poems quite quickly. So first big business pivot in my life was when I took that newspaper, the Pitchforth Post, and instead went around knocking on doors and selling it as a revenue stream to parents as a publisher. So I would publish their children's artwork in my newspaper. So I had a dual revenue stream immediately. Not only did I have the parent paying me to publish their children's work, but then I had the revenue from selling the newspaper. So I always look back on the first big pivot. Plus, didn't give my brothers a share in the takings. They were my first employees. So something that really framed right from the start was this kind of spirit of entrepreneurialism, which I think is quite a big piece of New Zealand lifestyle. But it's also shaped by a bit of humility and humbleness and sometimes apologetic. So it's one of my soapbox moments now is to sort of encourage New Zealanders and Australians to really raise their voices.
Yeah. Having lived here a long time and in New Zealand too, I kind of agree. I think Kiwis probably more than Australians underpitch themselves a bit. But
especially wahine talent, I have to say. So I think it's really important that they really step into the light.
I love the fact, I thought you were going to say you were a lot buying newspapers from the newsagent and selling them at a premium around the neighbourhood, but you're actually publishing your own paper.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, no, we did graduate from crayons to pens. I remember we weren't typing so much then, and but it was the first business, and then there was a few more to follow. Some a little naughtier than others, I have to say.
Wonderful. What a fantastic entrepreneurial background. That's great. Now, when we were doing the prep for this, you talked about making a choice about career, and you obviously chose business, and we'll explore that. But what was the other option you had?
Well, I actually went to law school, so I studied business and law, and did have choices. And there was plenty I love about the law. Like, I really love the way they teach you to think, to consider risk, to arbitrate, to negotiate. I specialise quite a lot in legal negotiation, which is about mutual beneficial outcomes. So not always what we call zealous advocacy for your client. It's always about finding a sustainable way forward. And the way that taught one to think quite creatively is something I feel has really coloured the way I move forward as a leader. But I chose not to continue in law, although I had a few choices on the table at the time when you graduate from university and you have the typical choices available. And part of that was because at the time I felt you had a lot more agency over what you did in a business career. Unilever was one of my options, as was Qantas and so on. And right from the start in those kind of roles, you had a lot of empowerment to run a small brand of noodles or to drive what you did on a daily basis. Whereas by definition in law, it's not so appealing when you have to really work your way up the ranks. And back in those days, it was very apparent that you were given the jobs to be done. And there was a bit of a glass ceiling back then as well. I was also really keen to travel, which manifested in my later career. But at the same time, the jurisprudence of New Zealand is a little restricted. You can sort of move to different places, but you couldn't pop up in Canada or France and really understand the jurisprudence of the country. So there was a few reasons, but I have to say the real reason was that Unilever sent a box of cleaning products to my flat. I was a scarfie in Dunedin at Otago, and that was the cincher. Like, I was sealed the deal because they really read their audience and they knew their consumer. And all of us had a job to do to clean those flats and get out. So that was probably the one that really sold me back in the day. Yeah,
creative talent acquisition strategy back then. Fantastic. And I'm not going to guess this, but are you a goal setter in career terms?
I think, yes. I think it defines. I mean, I'm not linear, that's for sure. But I've always had my eye on the prize in terms of what kind of a leader I want to be, what kind of an impact I want to have. How that comes about has changed quite a lot over time, but I would say yes, I've always been quite clear on some of the things that I would like to experience or some of the places I'd like to go and some of the impact I'd like to have. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. And like a lot of people in FMCG who are fortunate enough to start in tier one, the opportunities are great. There's generally good training, you get the chance to move around a bit, functionally, geographically, and you started at Unilever, which is one of the best.
Yeah.
A lot of people, once they get into that rhythm, stay for a long time. Now, was that tempting for you to kind of just become a Unilever forever, or is the kind of ambition to do other things always there?
Well, I do think once Unilever, always Unilever. So there is a bit of that anyway. Yeah. But I also think I did stay for quite a long time. I think 6 years is, in the context of careers nowadays, is a fairly long time. And I agree with you. It is a world-class training ground. And I was fortunate to be on some of their management training programs where by definition you move around functions. So it's a very organised experience. So you can actually move cross-functionally. And I moved 3-4 times trans-Tasman from Wellington to Auckland and so on, even in the time I worked there, and across many functions and locations. So I was tempted in the sense of I think you could very easily have a long career there. I think for me, though, it was an opportunity that came up. I think also they're quite linear with how they organise themselves. So you could always see the path ahead of you. And I've always been quite attracted to the pivot, to the broken things, to turning things around. At Unilever, it's very structured. And I think you can walk into a role and have a wonderful growth experience. But to really put your stamp on something and start finding your signature can sometimes take a move. And I think in that respect, I was looking to, at that time in my career, build my signature and went into a fairly broken place to help turn it around and was kind of hooked from there.
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting lesson there. People often get quite fixated on the jobs, and you've done some amazingly interesting jobs, which we'll come to. But it's a journey of an organisation that often defines the experience you're going to have. And when you work for superly well-organised tier ones, and my kids are both in different tier ones just now, they're so well run. They're fully optimized. Everything's perfect. It's been thought of. Everything's done in such a kind of excellent way, systems, process, and so forth. But it means that actually that becomes, after a while, that's what you know. That's all you know. And at some point, you'll need another experience to really push yourself. Now, the organization might be able to provide that, but for you, it was another organization. So you went to Henkel.
Yes, I did. And I think it's, I don't want to be boxed into a function and so on. So, and going to Henkel, of course, I went into another functional role, but at the same time, moving through those different companies, I was headhunted. So I was fortunate to have those opportunities come. But I think with Unilever, it's an exceptional business with plenty of runway. But I think in the modern world, it is important also to have that famous spider web and to really challenge yourself to be outside your comfort zone and chase a trajectory, not a destination, and really build that adaptability and perspective that different organizations can bring on top to really layer that fabric.
Yeah. And so it's Henkel, then GSK. And was GSK, for some of the reasons, a different trajectory, something new to try?
Yeah. So I think, Henkel gave a lot of discipline as well. Yeah. It's a very well-run, structured company.
German.
Very German company. I do like the European companies until now. But so I think it really kind of built on that and layered onto that fabric. And then Glaxo, it's scheduled products, it's pharma, there's a lot of science-backed products as well, so it's a different brand set. So both gave different things. Henkel also has whole new avenues and channels with the salon side of the business, and Glaxo has scheduled products and the science-based oral care as well with dentistry, etc. So the routes to market, the framework of the different teams are quite different, so the experiences are very different. Great. And I think that's what builds.
It does completely. Yeah. You said it's a spider web, lots of ways to describe it, but it's just gathering different experiences in different ways. And the next step is really interesting. We'll get into that, which you stepped out of, this FMCG career, the spider web experiences, to do your own thing. So tell us about that decision.
Yeah, well, I think it was on paper, it probably looks like quite a radical decision, but for me, it was quite natural. It was quite an organic decision. I've always, as I said, enjoyed running my own businesses in different ways, or felt that spirit. And to this day, I do appreciate a sense of ownership, whether it's in my role or in the company I'm working in. So I've always thought that it was something I wanted to do. It was actually, I was at a point where I was starting a young family, and I thought this would be my flexible solution to everything. And it was, it really taught you have to, as you know so well, you have to do a little bit of everything. You have to really have that enterprise outlook. It's you're running your own show. But I think it was something that, and so I ran my own business and really changed the P&L. So really investigated how to take things digital, how to modernize things. But there's a responsibility that comes with it as well. You have I had 22 people's livelihoods counting on me. I didn't have that kind of sparring partner that I really enjoy in a business. So I'm probably at my best when I'm surrounded by people and a whiteboard and a coffee and building on ideas and so on. So it was lonely in a way, but I was very fortunate that I went to purchase an adjacent company and acquire it. And by definition, got into a situation where that sort of put me on the market inadvertently. I had two people in a bidding war, and you just don't get that kind of intersection very often in your life. So I took the opportunity to sell and exit. So it was a successful moment. It was a few years.
What was the business time?
It was in education, and it was a sort of a digitalized education business. I'll have to go into detail sometime, but it was an adjacent industry. The skills were transferable coming out of FMCG or coming out of business. It was about managing big clients, delivering service, driving revenue growth. So it was a lot of the same principles, but it was in a completely different industry.
That's great. So that exit is really interesting. So successful exit, really.
Yeah, by accident, perhaps, rather than design. Yeah. And
were you thinking at that point, well, I could do this again, or I do I step back into corporate life, which is what you did?
I escaped Europe. I thought I'm going to finally have my time to travel, because it is quite physically demanding. You don't switch off quite in the same way when it's your own thing, which is ironic when it is your flexibility as well.
Yeah, you got both.
So, yeah, exactly. And I did have a very young family at the time. I think my son was 18 months old. Right. But again, the famous network came into play. So I was very lucky that I just think the power of the people around you, the mentors that you have, the people that you know, is always a real weapon in the arsenal. And I had a knock on the shoulder from a previous Unilever boss who I respected enormously and would like to have worked with him again. So I went across to Danone. So it wasn't as intentional as one might imagine. But I was very clear that I wanted, he was sort of talking about big team management and ticking boxes, and, going back into Fortune 500 and top 15 FMCG globally is a different kind of a scale and a different experience, as you know. So I was ready for that. So I think it's about when the opportunity comes along, you jump at it, and the people around you giving you advice, you trust them. And in this case, it all sort of aligned. Yeah.
I'm curious, when you step back into Tier 1, the structure and the rigor that comes with that, having done your own thing for a while, was the mindset different?
Look, yes, it was. I think, funnily enough, though, the roles I ended up moving into benefited from that.
Yeah.
So
there's some very cool roles. We'll get into those.
And where I won, so to speak, and had a bit of a superpower was because you could kind of see very quickly that enterprise level thinking. You are out of the silos and the nuances of silos pretty quickly. So, for me, one of the frustrations with big FMCG is that functional boxing. And I think to really run a company properly, you have to be the intersection between the functions and not in the function where possible. So it really helped with that kind of thinking. So
Europe's come up a couple of times so far. You moved Danone from Sydney to Paris.
Yes.
Which presumably is the head office.
It's their headquarters.
Yeah.
They have 3 or 4 offices in Paris, but this was in their headquarter office, which is in Boulevard Haussmann, opposite Galeries Lafayette. So they've moved up the road a little bit now, but it's called 17 or 17 Boulevard Haussmann. So it's the absolute heartland of Danone.
Yeah, brilliant. I've hinted to these 3 amazing roles. The first one is the Manifesto Innovation Accelerator. What's that?
Look, one might ask. The premise at the time, Danone was chasing accelerated growth, and 150,000 plus employees, huge revenues. They were really mature, especially in the European and French market. So how they rocket growth is pretty tricky, especially when you're talking about large brands and saturated markets. So one of the ways they did it was to sort of invest in different methodologies. One was to send innovation and growth out to startups and then reabsorb it. One was VC, which I could have a long conversation about the role of VC in corporate. But another one was to build companies inside Danone as startups to try and alleviate from the rigor of typical innovation and say, what if we accelerated? What if we built new business models? And what if we did things faster and differently? It does a couple of things. It was a bit of a dual purpose role to legitimately build new businesses for the company in new spaces and new business models, which was the different piece beyond the current worldwide business units. So something beyond, but also to try and test and learn we had a very sophisticated strategy and insights department that used a lot of tools, but they were very academic. So we were able to apply some of that thinking in real life, in real test cases, and validate for them, look, this one's worth investing in. It could tell us A, B, and C with the data. So it was a bit of a dual purpose, but it was the most magical time in my career. I think it was probably the highlight chapter, which I know we shouldn't have one, but it was everything that it sounds like in terms of being entrepreneurial, running startups, running your own show. So you're basically a GM of your own baby company, and you have to resource it with lean resource and creative ways. You have to pitch for money, but it's not your money. So that's the difference. And you have the backing and the proximity of a behemoth behind you.
Yeah. I think that's one of the funnest roles
it absolutely
I've come across in FMCG. And is there anything you could point to and say, we did this?
Yeah, look, I mean, I launched allergy-friendly brands for kids, for example, in the UK, which is if you walk into the free-from aisle in any supermarket, it's free from everything, gluten, free from allergens, free from soy. There's 14 big allergens they're often free from, but it's also free from colour, free from taste, and not very child-friendly. So the insight was that children are often excluded by definition of their allergens or allergies. So you think about the archetype of a UK birthday party, a bit similar in Australia. It's all about the food. It's anchored in the cake. And some of those kids, they literally had to leave. I met real children. This was the difference. It was consumer-centric innovation. And they had to leave the room during the birthday party moment for fear of really being hurt by a birthday party cake. So the insight was, if you really want to include those kids, you develop a brand for them that is inclusive. So by the end, we could, give them snacks that were healthy and friendly, and they could take them to school and share them with their friends, and it was safe for them. And it was colourful and endorsed by Marty the Alien. And, so it was really thinking about all the elements of the brand. So, and how to launch a brand, how to create a brand from the VI to the value proposition. I had to work with factories. It was a wonderful role in that respect. So, quite a few, worked with spirulina, which is a new emerging ingredient going into consumer homes. and understanding how their energy flagged and whether they like the taste and so on. So innovation, but also business models, like in China, working with how we are effectively building reseller models because everything's quite fast to copy. So how do you get our products to consumers in a really pragmatic way? So lots of different projects to try and call them baby businesses to try and rocket growth. And I did have the pleasure of working for probably the most pragmatic, inspiring and probably one of the best leaders I've ever worked for. So I think that makes a difference too.
Wonderful. You then moved to the Netherlands for two more roles with Danone. And the first one, another amazing job title, the Global Director of New Growth Spaces. Now, I've written my notes here and I'm going to use it to quote Pauline Hanson, which I've never done before.
Yeah, I know. It was a little... okay.
Please explain.
Yeah, look, new growth space, again, it comes to that. They were looking for a bit of a unicorn. So then, if you think about some of the brands at a company like Danone, they're massive. A good example is Aptamil. It is a 4 billion euro brand. It's bigger than the GDP of some countries. It's very mature, but it's very consumer centric. It's very needed in the households it's needed in, and very backed by science. But to try and grow a brand like that on a global scale when it's already really large is quite tricky. So it was, again, how do we take a very well-established and mature brand in mature categories, which is restricted as well and regulated, and grow it? So the role in that example, it would be things like, what if we apply Netflix thinking to feeding? So it's not about a brand, and it's about having your child fed in any way that may manifest, whether it's breastfeeding or bottle feeding or allergies or whatever it might be. So that kind of thinking, and how do we, and legitimately, how do we innovate as well? How do we change our global footprint and our architecture to really optimize and continue to drive revenue growth?
Yeah, great. And the final role Danone was, again, in the Netherlands to Amsterdam this time, and the job title was Global Director, Plant-Based Acceleration.
Yeah. They like a good title.
Yeah, just fantastic. Everyone tells me that careers in FMCG are boring. They're not.
Well, not when I was very lucky.
No,
So
yeah. So tell me about that one.
I mean, Danone is a dairy company.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally a dairy company. We have 30 ambitions to protect the planet. And the reality is they have to kind of convert 8% of the company to plant-based to meet some of those ambitions. So how do we accelerate that? So obviously they've had big acquisition over the years. They tend to make a big acquisition every 10 years, but you can accelerate in many different ways, through global footprint, through innovation, through M&A. So I did all those things, and the idea was to try and accelerate the plant-based, or scale up the plant-based part of the business. And yeah, so that's kind of by definition what it was. Every day was different. It was making dairy-based baby formula as plant-based as possible, but without compromising on the nutritional quality. It was looking at geographical expansion and understanding what competition are doing in different spaces, and it was M&A as well.
It's interesting, those roles. I almost jokingly haven't come across them before, but whereas I wonder whether in Australia we just don't have as many of those types of roles. They typically sit somewhere else. I don't know.
That's been my challenge, quite frankly, because I think, they do exist in some companies. They have, they have to do business development. They have to look at new growth spaces. They have to have an eye on the future. I mean, there were roles looking at trends. There was a role, 100% of the time. So it's the scale. Yeah. And often in the companies of that scale, the Australian portion of the company is an outpost, for want of a better word.
Not big enough. Yeah.
It just doesn't have the scale. So coming home, that was actually one of the things that I call Australia home now. It was one of the things that I really had to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. And talking about that transition back, we've often had guests on the pod who have had amazing experiences overseas in regional or global roles. And the move back to home, to Australia, isn't often as smooth as they expect. How did you find it?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably been one of the toughest decisions. We came for family, the family was starting high school and so on, and I knew what I was walking away from. I really felt really respected, had a great network, had the dream role, and actually the next role that I had to turn down to come back was also probably the dream role. So back in Paris. So it was a really tough decision, and I think I was very aware coming back that I had to be quite intentional about what I did, because what has energized me and what I have been exposed to is a very very rare experience, but it also means it's quite tricky to find something that has the same level of energy for me. So I have found that in a different way, but it's pretty difficult coming back. And I think it's something that a lot of your guests and a lot of people you meet in the industry here talk about and say it's a contradiction, because on the one hand, not everybody values that overseas currency. But on the other hand, personally, you feel very inspired and stimulated by different things and you've been shaped by your experiences. So how do you bring those together and explain to someone, well, there's some real value in what I've learned and seen, and I can help you do things differently by coming along and joining you.
Yeah, and of course there is. I think Australia is getting better. If we go back 10 years, it was a very myopic view that you've been away from Australia, therefore you're going to start where you left off, as opposed to you've been gaining new experiences and learning new things. You can bring back a complete different perspective to help the business change its views, path, and be better in the local marketplace. We're not fully there yet, but it's definitely slightly easier now than it was 10 years ago. But yeah, it's we still get a little bit fixated on how important the domestic market is here. And there is some unique components to it, but it's not that unique.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as you say, I mean, I'm fortunate in that the company I've joined, most of the exec and the people I work with have had overseas experience and really value it.
Yeah. So they've got a wider horizon.
Exactly, you find your tribe. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's get into that. You're the Chief Commercial Officer of McPherson's, an ASX listed business, a long history, been in Australia for a long time, but it feels a little bit like it flies under the radar a wee bit. So here's the opportunity. We've got circa 5,000 listeners to the pod, mostly within the FMCG world in Australia, who is your audience. So time to let them know a bit more about McPherson's.
Yeah. So, but we have a very proud history, actually. We're a very old company, as you said, and interestingly, were originally making the rivets and bolts that now hold together the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So every bolt in the Harbour Bridge is a McPherson's bolt. So we are a proudly Australian company. Yeah. But we're in our almost fourth chapter of being, because what comes with that age and that history is not only really precious brands that we now have to be the custodians of and have that privilege, but also we predate the internet. So, it has been quite a transformation. And so this latest iteration of this latest chapter is a new way forward in health and beauty. So we're now very much a focused health and beauty company. But the last divestment was only within the last 2 years. The household brand Multix was divested. So it's still fairly fresh in this new journey, in this new chapter. And we have gone through quite a lot of transformation. So I think what we represent is this wonderful heritage and these really unique brands with such longevity that are very dear to many customers and are in many consumer homes. They'll be in everybody's home. But the job to be done is to make sure we become increasingly modern and relevant and really invest in those brands. So that's the journey that we're on now. So we've got a new leadership team and a new vision and a real new energy around the business.
I was going to say it feels, and I've been watching that develop, Tanya, with real interest, because I love a business on a journey with purpose, and I get that sense. There's an energy that comes. You're making some really good hires. You're building a team, which is very different to what I've seen in the business before. What about the brands? Just again to help you understand the kind of from a consumer perspective, what parts
we have big household brands. So we have Lady Jane, which is a 97-year-old brand. Manicare is one that's in many people's homes. They may not know it. Swisspers, Fusion, Dr. Lewin Skincare. So we play in some big categories, and we have some. We have some brands that Australians really do love, Australians and New Zealanders do love.
So the vision for the business now, talk a bit about what that is and your role to deliver that.
Fundamentally, it's about making sure that we take those brands and help them get to consumers in the most relevant and sustainable way.
Great. So how do you kind of mobilize the troops to achieve that?
Yeah, well, what I would say is I do see the role as connecting the strategy with the brands to deliver the commercial results. So, and what I must say too is that part of the role is to organise the business to do that, and that means recruiting a new team and organising them to go after the growth spaces. And I am very privileged that I have an absolute gun team on board at the moment. And so, it makes my role really easy. Like I'm able to direct traffic and help remove roadblocks for them. We try and reduce some of those friction points that are inevitably there in an old business coming to life again. And I think, also holding that healthy tension that should be there between sales and marketing, et cetera. So some of those sorts of things.
Yeah. I'm curious Always. And I meet a lot of sales directors, chief commercial, chief customer officers. Titles vary, but who are there to drive the revenue and profitability of the business. What do you think makes a great commercial leader?
Yeah. Well, this one, I love this question. First, I have to say, I feel sales director is a different role from a CCO. It might be subtle nuance, but I think, for me, a sales director is a functional lead and really leads the customer agenda. But for me, a chief commercial officer, on the other hand, is accountable for that enterprise level P&L, so the commercial system as a whole, so how that operates together, which is really relevant in our company right now because we are moving through a transformation and closing a chapter on a new business model. So I think for me, first and foremost, in that context, leadership, because you have to build belief. You have to have something for your team to latch on to and really buy into, especially when we're operating with quite a bit of ambiguity and the swim lanes are changing on a daily basis. So I think, having that development of leaders as one of the agenda points is what makes a good one. I think the system thinking, particularly for us right now as well, but broadly connecting those dots, finding the narrative between the different parts of the business and coming out of the functional silo is really important to be able to do the job, to drive the whole P&L. I think customer and consumer obsession. We have some delightful customers that we have the privilege of working with on a daily basis, and consumers too. We're in a lot of consumer houses, but you have to be obsessed at all your innovation, all your decisions, all the pieces of the puzzle have to be born of those, either the customer or the consumer as the end game. Courage at the moment in particular, and judgment, because I think as you become a more senior leader, it's more about the trade-offs. There's no right or wrong. It's more about the trade-offs and making a quick decision, bringing clarity. I think clarity is often required. And right now we need a lot of clarity in the fast-changing world that we live in. And then humanity was my last one. I think, if you can lead with humanity, you can make the difference between a functional lead or a strong sales director and one who can really make an impact on people's lives and make a difference to the company and leave a legacy.
I think everything you talked to there, Tanya, it is enterprise leadership. It's way beyond the function. I think you'll surprise a few people with that answer.
Right.
In a good way.
Oh, okay.
In a really good way, because I think it kind of, enterprise leadership isn't just about the moment and the number and hitting your budget. It's far more than that, and comes back to the strategy and the vision and where the business is going. I think you can only do that if you think like an enterprise leader and frame it up that way, which you have beautifully there. Another topic I want to just touch on, very deliberately, we seek out and I love to meet senior female leaders who are running commercial functions, and we've done a really good job, I think, in kind of keeping our gender mix 50-50 in male, female on the commercial side. Now, someone who's come back to Australia from a period away, where do you think we are in a kind of gender diversity perspective within sales? Have you seen any change, or is it as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the juxtapositions is the difference between Europe and Australia and how it is still quite jarring. I think it's not through intent, it's almost infrastructure and mindset. And I have to say, like, the Dutch leaders really have a voice at the table and are very unapologetic and demanding with that voice. And equally, the French leaders, who I admire enormously, lead with a level of intellect and assumed respect that you don't always see in Australia. So I think there's two parts to the puzzle. I think they don't have some of the same challenges that we have here from an infrastructure perspective and a political landscape. I think the social systems are very different. Nannies are cheap and tax deductible. That people put their career first. They're very unapologetic about the way that they handle themselves. So I think we've still got a little bit of growth to do and evolution from infrastructure perspective and perhaps a mindset perspective. But I think we can all play a role in that. And I think, or I hope that the trade-off that we've made by not being there also has benefit, right? Because, there were women there who would have to, for example, go on maternity leave and come back within 4 weeks. And yes, they'd be promoted and there would be no material impact to their career, but you have to ask yourself, what is the trade-off that you're willing to experience?
Yeah. It's interesting. I big advocate of gender diversity, and particularly in the commercial, we operate across sales, marketing, category, commercial excellence, and I think partially people move freely across function a lot more now than they used to, which is by definition helping create diversity, because sales isn't for boys and marketing is not for girls. I think that functionally changes things, structurally changes things. But also I think the modern commercial function, modern sales function, and the skills you require to be effective in that requires diverse thinking. And I think it's attracting a lot more different personality types, which opens that up too. But I think we've got a long way to go.
I think we do. And I think some of that is, it's important that we acknowledge it and have the conversation. I think that's a very big part of it. But I'd also say, try both. Because if, like in my experience, I've done sales and marketing and ping-ponged quite a few times. And they give different levels of satisfaction for different reasons. And I do remember having, back in the Unilever day when I was in marketing, having an almost year-long conversation about whether it should be a spoon or a jug on the front of the gravy packet and getting really frustrated very quickly because I do like to move fast. So I think if you like pace and you think quickly and you like creative problem solving, it is worth trying both functions and not being siloed into one or the other, because ping-ponging around gives you that diversity even within your own career path.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Back to McPherson's and final question on McPherson's. I say I'm fascinated with the business and journey. You clearly are on a journey. If we were to jump forward 5 years, we started, building the Harbour Bridge. We're now a health and beauty business with revenue growth. And if we look forward 5 years, what will McPherson's look like?
Yeah, so McPherson's will be a very focused health and beauty company led by very smart people, very clear signature, and very well-loved brands. I have absolute conviction.
I look forward to seeing that journey unfold. And what about you and your career? Because I think you've done some amazing things, Tanya. A great example of what an FMCG career can be if you choose to lean in and push yourself and try new things, which you have done throughout. But you're now, Chief Commercial Officer, lots of runway ahead in terms of the business. But where do you go, in terms of career as well?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think I intentionally chose ASX listed. Coming back to Australia, I knew what I was looking for. And again, you create choice for yourself. That's how you can always make good decisions and have many options. And I think I wanted something that was impactful and had proximity. So the best option to do that here is an ASX company. So I am attracted to that. I like transformation. I like, for me, it's always about the journey, not the destination. So really trying to stretch outside the comfort zone, make an impact. I do like purposeful places too. And whether that is building a wonderful new team or helping, being the custodian of a company that we need, as Australians, we really should have on our radar. We will never be flying under the radar. So those kinds of deliverables. So hopefully we've achieved some of those things. But I think the next step is going to have those key elements as well. Like for me, that's really important, having a team around me that I admire and enjoy working with. I am always very cautious who I go and work with, and because that's how you learn. So I'm always attracted, like in this case too, I was attracted to the leadership team and the vision and the direction. That won't change for me, whatever the opportunity is.
You said something in the prep session we had for this, which kind of frames some of your career thinking. And I think you're alluding to it there really, which is about moving, career decisions for you, about moving towards something, not away. Just elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I mean by that is I never want to get to a point where I'm uncomfortable in the wrong way. I think if you're uncomfortable, you grow, you lean into that. But I never want to get to a point where I'm finished a job or I can't see what else is on the horizon. So I always lean to something. And I think that's the smart thing to do, whether it is that you have a dream to work in Paris, you go for it, or whether it is that you want to learn a different skill set to round you out. I think I've always been quite intentional about what I want to have in the toolbox. And I kind of think of it like a fabric that you put all the pieces together, and it's definitely not linear. It's definitely not functional. So I always like to go to an opportunity that excites you and gives you those butterflies and makes you think about the possibilities and fills you with optimism. I think that's the smart way to run your career, rather than getting to a point where you have to leave something that is disappointing you.
I think that's wonderful advice. Sometimes with the best intentions in mind, we move towards something and it doesn't quite work out. We have expectations that aren't quite realized. What happens if that is the case in your experience? What do you do about it?
Yeah, well, I think inevitably things change. That is the life we lead these days, whether it's in your professional life, your personal life, or your expectations weren't met. these things do happen, but I think you have to think of it like a learning. I like to think of my career like a fabric, and all the different things that we do build on that fabric and make it stronger and more colourful. And I would encourage anyone in that position to really do a moment of soul searching and say, if it doesn't meet your expectation and it's really de-energizing you, maybe it is time to look for something else and just jump to the next stepping stone. It's part of a journey, and just be kind to yourself. That stepping stone doesn't always have to be up. It can be lateral, and you can have learnt from something and then move on to something else. But I also believe we're going to see a lot more of it as the world evolves quite quickly and things are moving at a pace that they didn't move at before. So it's a good skill to build, to jump around the stepping stones faster and to think of things in a really positive mindset.
Yeah, I agree. Be prepared for that. I think things are moving so fast now that expectations versus reality will often be in discord more than perhaps they were in the past, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely okay. Yeah.
Good. Final question, Tanya. Got there quite quickly. Always feels faster than you think, but if you were to talk to your younger self back in Unilever days, what career advice would you give Tanya back then?
I think 3 things. I would say be kind to yourself, that a career is choices, and that a spiderweb or a jungle gym career is much more exciting than a typical ladder in a function, because that will frustrate many people. So, we can always think quite laterally and differently about our career. But I would say advocate for yourself. Don't always wait to be chosen. Take agency and be very intentional. The how is not so important, but be very intentional about your conditions for success personally and what you need to be energized and what de-energizes you, and be very aware of that. But I also think I'd say to her, do you know what? Dreams can come true. Like you can really walk on the cobblestones in Paris.
Yeah. Wonderful. What an amazing journey, Tanya. I loved the conversation. I think, as I said right at the start, for listeners who are perhaps in the early stages of their FMCG career, look where it can take you.
It's amazing.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. It was a good experience.
For long-time listeners, you'll be used to hearing my Scottish lilt as a host, but we'll have noticed more podding from Andrew Cannock and Ben Carnegie over the past 6 months to 12 months. Here at AXR, we've evolved the business for 2026, and I've handed the sales and marketing practice on to Andrew, who will now lead as director as I step into our new executive search practice with Greg O'Shea and Shanti Smith. So less podding from me in this channel, but watch out for our new pod, Your Path to CEO, coming to you soon. Finally, to you guys, thanks for listening. If you're not connected to AXR and you're serious about your career, reach out to Andrew, Ben, or Beth for your annual career conversation and to join our incredible sales, marketing, and category talent community. From me, Mike Dixon, thank you for supporting the journey of our pod, and the team will be back soon with more episodes and insights and thoughts to help your future in sales and marketing.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more career insights and advice from Australia's inspiring sales and marketing leaders. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.